Recording. So this is the 7th episode of Life on Life's Terms, and we have a fella here named Jeff. He's a guy I've known a little while, in and out of life in recovery and sobriety, and I think he's a fantastic guy, and the powerful Jeff is here today. We're going to his picture will be out on the Instagram feed tomorrow when the episode is, or actually Thursday when the episode is aired. And Jeff, you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
A little bit about myself. Man, I don't know where to start. There's so much to tell. Well, I guess the recovery stuff. I've been in recovery since 2003. That's where I first came into the world of recovery, and had some success, had some years, and went back at it eventually. Stopped going to meetings, stopped doing all the things that I was doing, and things went sideways in my life, and started drinking, and so I'm back into the world of recovery, and struggled for the last couple of years, but things are going okay. I've got a bunch of kids. Haven't worked for about a year and a half right now, but typically when I'm working, I've been a welder for the last few years, structural welder. I don't know. I love sports. Favorite color is purple. What do you want to know?
So what are the age ranges for the kids?
Oldest one is 25. Actually, one of them's turning, I better get this right, 24 today. Today.
Oh, wow. We
June
should say
6th.
Happy birthday. Yeah, that's great.
That's Kieran's birthday today. And then 18, 14, and 12.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's quite the range.
It is, yeah.
How are they with you being in recovery? Are they supportive for you at this moment, or are they still just making their way back into your life?
No, they've always been in my life, and of course they'd rather have me doing what I'm doing now than being a freaking drunk, right? So they're pretty happy with what's going on. That's
fantastic. So about what age did your addiction kick off at?
Oh, I'd like to say the first time I drank, which was probably about 10, because I loved it.
Yeah.
I remember it like it was yesterday. But probably in my early teens, by the time I was 14, I was smoking weed every day and drinking on the weekends and typical high school stuff. But, it got me going pretty quick. I started selling it so I could smoke more, and all the way through high school, I was baked every day, early, probably 14, I'd say.
You were saying that you like sports. Were you involved in sports in high school?
Yes, it was. Yeah. Growing up, I played baseball, soccer, all that kind of stuff, and then kind of stopped doing that once I found the wonders of drugs and alcohol. But then I discovered football in grade 11. And I quit drinking and smoking weed and all that kind of stuff because I loved football. So I started doing that.
It's funny how when we find one thing, we can almost abstain for a certain amount of time, but it's like the clock is on. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then, in my opinion, anyways, that's the way how my life was when I found something that I was okay with. That could kind of take me away from drugs and alcohol, but the clock watch was on. You know what I mean? Like eventually, it was all going to come tumbling down.
Yeah.
And,
the way I look at that is when I found the football, it was just another outlet for my poor self-esteem and being uncomfortable being me. Where the drugs and smoking weed every day made me cool, whatever you want to call it. And then once I found football, it gave me a bunch of role models. Like I loved the Raiders back in the day, the Howie Long and those guys, Lila Zato, and I thought they were cool as hell, but
Right
they all
on.
partied like maniacs, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
but it was just another escape, another thing to focus on, because I was so uncomfortable with being me, So it was whether it was any different than the drugs or not, not really, because it was just another support for me, right?
So it kind of just filled the void at the moment.
Filled the gap in the void of being uncomfortable being me, and things that I felt I was lacking or whatever at the time. I didn't really know what the hell was going on in my head, but I just felt like I needed to be something or somebody else, So.
And so let's talk about, as I like to call it, spinning around the drain. What did that look like for you?
What did that look? Man, I spun around that drain for a long time. I mean, when I look back at my life now, like man, I was probably spinning around it in high school, of course I knew everything, and football was going to be my savior, and I didn't need to listen to anybody because it was such hot shit, and, I didn't have to, apply myself in school because it was, just that whole ego trip that I was going to get what I wanted, and it didn't work. It ended up coming around and biting me in the butt eventually, right? Just, yeah, just spinning around the drain, how many times did I drive impaired, when I was young, and how long did I do it? I mean, I worked in nightclubs for years and years and years. So pretty much every night I worked, I was doing that. And
so just because these are listeners, Jeff, we should probably describe how tall you are. so that these guys can have an understanding. I mean, the picture, I think, will do it justice. That's why we had you over by the door.
Okay.
This way people can have a bit of a benchmark. So how tall are you, Jeff?
Around 6'8".
And size, like how heavy are you?
350.
So imagine that coming at you. Sitting in a bar, right? I think anybody would be coming 10-2 and walking out the door,
That was the intention, yeah.
So as any good addict, while you're spinning around the drain, you had suggested that you got heavily involved in football.
Yeah.
As any good addict, we take a lot of things to extremes, not just alcohol and drugs. Mm-hmm. So what was the extreme? Did you take football to an extreme, like a whole new height where you lived, breathed, died, and lived it every day? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, of course, man. Along with the football came steroids.
Yeah.
Once I discovered those, man, I was off to the races. I loved it because all of a sudden I'm larger than life, and I had to be the biggest, strongest, craziest mofo, that I could project and put out there. That's what I wanted to be because that's what I thought people respected and expected of me. And I just built this image of myself that I pieced together out of media and people like Howie Long and Lila Zato and guys that did some crazy stuff, and I wanted to be like that. I wanted to be 6'8" and bulletproof sort of thing. And
you damn near are, though. I mean, especially when you're jacked like that, right? I mean, what kind of injuries did you look at when you were playing? Like, did you get any serious injuries from?
The worst thing that happened to me, I tore my ACL when I was 22, but had a successful repair of that, and it hasn't really bothered me ever since. So,
wow.
Concussions,
What position did you play?
Typical stuff. I played offensive tackle.
Well, there you go, right?
Yeah. So with all the stuff that they've learned about CTE and concussions and all that kind of stuff, who knows, right?
Yeah, I fought. Like, I boxed when I was younger, so I definitely took my fair share of hits in the head, plus all the running around that we do in active addiction.
Yeah.
I got a lot of hits in the head from that.
Yeah,
and,
me too. I probably have more non-football concussions than I do football concussions, right?
Yeah, and you know, it was interesting. Just a little while ago, I was watching this thing about concussions and some of the things that come about it. Like for instance, I spar boxing today, right? And so when I'm sparring boxing, the guy will be doing something, and I can't understand what the hell he's doing. It's almost like it's just go. You know what I mean? I don't see the feints. I don't see anything. It's just hands on, let's get this done. Right. And the other thing I'm starting to notice is like I have photographic memory. So I'll see things that I remember, but I can't recall why I'm remembering it. And apparently this is due to, well, they're saying it could be concussion related, right? The other thing too is PTSD feelings. Like you feel like you're fearful of something, but you have no recollection or understanding of why.
What? Yeah, just generalized anxiety sort of stuff. Yeah, I've had that. Yeah, big time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you get that in the meetings at all? Sometimes I get that in the meetings around the large groups, large crowds. No,
not anymore. I used to have it, a lot of anxiety, but I worked really hard on putting myself into uncomfortable positions and figuring out that I'm not going to be okay, you know, and getting over it. And it doesn't bother me anymore. I can sit in front of 100 people and talk, and
that's pretty cool, right? I mean,
it's okay.
It's neat when we finally get to that place.
Yeah,
right?
It is.
But as I always say, we earn that step one, you know? And that's a hard motherfucker to earn, right?
It is, yeah. It takes work like anything else in recovery, man. It takes freaking work.
Isn't
you know?
Digging that hole until finally it's like 6'9" and you can't stand or see out of it, right? I mean, that's just what it is, and it seems like you cannot claw yourself out of it. And I mean, in my experience, I've seen a lot of guys in recovery who get everything back really quickly. And when that ends up happening, they just shit it down the drain. You know what I mean? So it almost seems like as hard as we work for that step one, we have to work just as hard and as diligently for the family to come back, the job to come back, and all that stuff, right? I've seen a lot of guys in recovery who are successful very, very quickly. But that success comes with serious issues in the context that it just doesn't last. You know, they piss it away. Like the family comes back right away. And as soon as the family comes back right away, you know, I don't think I need the meetings right now.
Well, that's what happened to me. That's exactly what happened to me when you know, when I first went into recovery in 2003, I kept going to meetings for a few years, but then we had, you know, a couple more kids, and it became more of an issue to go out to meetings, and you know, became a bone of contention between me and the wife. So I just quit. I quit going eventually because it was just, you know, it was a pain in the ass, and it also became. I got to the point where I didn't want to identify myself as an addict anymore, because I you know, convinced myself that was making me more sick than I actually was, and constantly talking about drugs and using and, you know, all that kind of stuff just kept my mind in there. So, you know, I figured I was cured and I could just not go to the, you know, but, you know, it just sort of hangs around. And when things went sideways, what did I do? I resorted to substance once again to deal with my emotional issues that have always, I mean, you know, I talk about, you know, I'm not scared of anybody physically ever, you know, do whatever in that world, but give me an emotional confrontation and, you know, I'm running, you know, I'm squirming and I want to get the hell out of there.
And that's kind of what's suggested upon us when we talk about the past, because let's face it, some of the past we remember, some of it we don't really remember, and it could be a denial, didn't even know I lied scenario, right? And so what I've learned in my time is to disclose the emotions that I went through in my past, as opposed to exacting things that happened. The only things that are exacting that I know happened are the shit that I got charged with.
Right,
I mean, that proof, I know happened.
Yeah.
But other than that, I mean, I don't really go into like, maybe I did that. Because if I start doing that, I find that my old personification can pop up right away. And if that ends up happening, then the ego starts coming around, and then all of a sudden my sponsor has to come kick my fucking legs in. And once he has to do something like that, it feels like all is lost, you know? And there I am starting all over again. I mean, I'm very fortunate. I'm a first-time kicker. I have not relapsed in coming into the rooms. Right?
Yeah, you're one of the rare ones. Yeah.
There was a time in my early recovery, I actually thought I had to go out in order to be part of the club.
Right.
You know, I mean, that's how scary it was, right? And I remember my sponsor telling me, he was like, "Are you fucking crazy?" And I had Lenny, Lenny literally slapped the shit out of me. He grabbed me. He's like, "Oh, you want a drink?" And Lenny's not your size, but he's like 6'4" and 300 pounds or so. And I mean, he slapped the shit out of me. If there's any WAP that can lay his hands on me, that's not a WAP from my own family. It's that guy. He's the only guy. He'll be in actually in a couple weeks doing the same thing that you're doing on this podcast. But I thank God for him for doing that, because I was really convinced in that moment that I had to relapse in order to really get this thing. And it's a scary, scary road to go down.
Sure.
You know? When you see the newcomer coming in, what's the first suggestion that you try to pawn off to them, so to say?
Oh, man, keep coming back. You know, whatever happens, just keep coming back. If you slip, keep coming back. Because I had to keep coming back, you know, slow learner or whatever you want to call it. It took me a long time to get, like you said, get my ego out of the way. Because when my ego pops up, I don't want to listen to anybody, and I don't want to take suggestion, and I'm not teachable, and I'm going to do it my way. And my way has always been avoidance and hiding and you know, and escape sort of thing, right? And I can't live like that anymore. It doesn't serve me or anybody in my life that loves me and cares about me, right? So I got to take it on head on right now.
How's the work coming along with the emotional stability stuff?
Really good, actually.
Yeah.
You know, really good. You know, for a long time I just didn't feel things. I just, you know, I experienced them, but I didn't feel them. I just got used to putting, I call it, you know, my feeling box. I just jammed it all over, you know, it's over my right shoulder about 8 feet behind me. And I can see it, right? It's there. It's always there. And one of the things that I've worked really hard on as well is accessing that, you know, and not just thinking about, you know, when I get in a shitty headspace that I deserve to do something to get myself out of that, you know, whether it's drink or whatever, and that the only person, you know, the self-pity of, you know, I deserve to drink over this or use over this because I'm in pain and I'm uncomfortable, used to stop at me, right? So what I've done now is access that box. There's a whole bunch of feelings in there with mine, but there are also the feelings of my parents, my kids, and anybody else that cares and loves about me in my life. And now when I think about that box, I go, you know what? If I do that, I'm also hurting all of them. And that actually has built that bridge, you know, just saying that, I can actually feel it in my chest. Mm-hmm. Whereas before it was just a concept that I really didn't give a shit about because it was just me. Yeah. But since I've included everybody else into that, it actually is a visceral experience. Wow. You know, thinking about it, I'm getting goosebumps just talking about it right now, right? Which is freaking awesome because I didn't give a rat's ass for quite a while.
It's funny it's not really funny, but it's strange how callous we become in our active addiction, and how long it takes for that to actually dissipate. You know, I mean, there's been times when I thought about going out, and then the instant reaction after that was like, I would have to make amends to my mom again. And I realized in that moment, I have a relapse again every day. What I do not have again is another recovery.
Right.
I just do not have the energy to come back in and do it. I honestly believe that, like, I just honestly believe that there's no choice but to maintain maintenance in the context of doing what's suggested of us. I just don't have it in me to have to start all over again. It scares the living shit out of me.
Yeah.
And I think, like we talk about fear and recovery all the time, but I think there's healthy fear and then there's bad fear, right? Like, I'm not afraid to go into a bar if I'm playing guitar. That doesn't bother me. I have a reason and a purpose to be there. Would I go in there because I want to drink milk and watch the game? Right. No. I mean, I have a TV and there's other ways of accessing that. And I can be around sober people when I'm doing that.
Sure.
But I mean, to go out and perform, that's a different story, right? Have I gone into a bar and grabbed one of my sponsees who called me saying, I can't leave, can you come and get me? I've done that. Have I gone to a crack house? I've driven outside of a crack house waiting for somebody, but I haven't actually walked into a crack house. That's just not safe for me judicially. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, that's not a safe place to be going.
Right.
I've learned many times by people trying to rob me that's not a great place to be in.
And so, it's a safe place for anybody, man.
So call it time and time again. I guess we do learn from those mistakes at some point in our life, right? So your transition now, I mean, it's looking like you're going to be going into something like independent living, very, very, very similar to that, right?
Yeah.
Or the way to getting into independent living. How are you feeling about that transition?
I'm very excited about it. It's going to be nice.
You won't have another asshole in the room.
Living with 59 other guys has been a little bit onerous for the last 10 months or whatever, but it's progress, and of course it's like you were saying, it's uncomfortable a little bit because there's a little bit of unknown, but through doing what I'm supposed to be doing, talking to my supports and telling people that I'm uncomfortable, I've been able to come up with contingency plans, because that's always been a stumbling block for me before, that putting all my eggs into one basket, and when something went slightly wrong, I would lose my shit and go out, right? But this time, recognizing that pattern starting again. I didn't call my sponsor for 3 weeks. Okay, something's going on. I'm starting to do these little mind things, that tell me that, things are going sideways. I realized at one point that when I'm really not doing well emotionally or psychologically, I start counting stairs. Anytime I'm going up and down stairs, I'm counting them. I don't know what it is, but it's just a thing, right? And I do it when I'm stressed or I'm worried, or I do. That's what I do. And so whenever I find myself doing that, I go, okay, well, time to talk to somebody because something ain't right. And and so it's a learning process, but it takes a lot of the rigorous honesty that needs to be applied to things like my own thinking, because I can sit here and I can tell you stuff that's honest, but the shit that goes on in my head, nobody sees or knows, and I can twist it around, justify it a million times. So that's where that comes in for me, is just being able to admit that I do get a little squirrely, and it used to freak me out. Today I'm okay with it because it's just me. Yeah. And there's not a damn thing I can do about it. Accept it.
So jumping back to the last day that you used, what did that look like before you checked into recovery?
I don't really remember too much about it because I was basically on a suicidal mission of destruction, and I just didn't give a shit. I went out with the intention of doing myself in, and I ended up woke up in a jail cell, 3 days later. Did a bunch of stuff, didn't have a criminal record until I turned 51 years old, Now I do, a couple nice DUIs and some other charges, and but I'd sort of reached the point where I just didn't. It was the old tipping point, right? I didn't want to live, and I didn't really want to die, I guess, because I'm still alive. But I couldn't go on like I was going. It was just freaking hell. It was horrible.
It's crazy how we addicts can all identify with that feeling of suicide. Every single one of us. You can go into any meeting around wherever you are and walk into that meeting, and there will be at least one time that week or one time within those 2 weeks where they're talking about suicide. And every one of those addicts or alcoholics can talk about that breaking point where it wasn't even a thought. There was a serious attempt,
Yeah.
And I almost like, so I've worked in recovery settings in an institutional setting. And did you know that's actually a qualifier for us? So like when the counselor is sitting across from you and you start talking about a suicide attempt, so on and so forth, the counselor, that's actually like a green check mark in your file.
Yeah, good for you.
You're
an addict.
Shit, you hit the bottom now, boy. like that's what it boils down
Welcome to the club. Yeah.
So I think, and it's I think it's fantastic when we finally get to a place where we're not afraid of that. You know what I mean? We're not afraid to disclose that. Yeah, we had an attempt, and we lived, and from living past that, we're ready to take that step one. That's the hard earn. You know what I mean? That's why I really, really think that we can stop digging at any time.
Right.
I've heard one guy where he was talking about $1 million in his bank account was his bottom. I can't conceive of that. But what I recognize is that he felt the feeling of suicide. He felt the feeling of despair. He felt the feeling of hopelessness in that moment. He could not continue. He could not continue the way that he was. The external value that he had $1 million, who cares?
Right.
What I do care about is that he was hopeless, And I think, I don't know if you've heard this philosophy about daily moral inventory, but it's designed. So have you ever heard of organized chaos?
Yeah.
So organized chaos is kind of the idea like it actually comes from our daily moral inventory. Because when you look at our daily moral inventory and the questions that it asks us, it also makes us develop achievable goals for the next day.
Sure. Yep.
And then it also allows us to get comfortable with success and being able to make our own success. Success is not based upon how much money you have, in my opinion. It's also not based upon how many houses or cars or material things that you have. Truly, in my opinion, what success is based upon is, did you achieve your goals that you set out the next day? I didn't realize that till maybe about a year or two ago. And one of the things that was suggested to me was to add, how did you love yourself today? And I had a hard time with that because when I first came in, I could only like myself. And even then, I could only kind of like myself.
Yeah.
Right? I wanted to love myself, but I can only kind of like myself. And so what I've incorporated in my daily moral inventory is, how did I love myself physically today? Did you take care of yourself today? Mm-hmm. Did you spiritually? Did you talk to your higher power? Mm-hmm. Were you emotionally stable? And then were you willing to do service work today? And if I look at those 4 pillars throughout my day, my days go pretty good. Today was a pretty shitty day. But other than that, most days are really good, So have you seen that benchmark and the change in that daily moral inventory? Like as you're working through that, have you seen that success and those leaps and bounds that we can achieve?
Yeah, but like go back to it takes work. It takes diligence, and it takes the honesty, and it takes talking to somebody else about it. I'm still only about a year in, and so I still slip emotionally almost every day, emotionally and psychologically, right? So, I still have the struggle. I'd like to call my sponsor every day and talk to him, but do I? No, I don't. That's a work in progress. I've seen it, but I'm still also struggling. I don't live in fear anymore today. I don't live in fear of the consequences of going out and drinking. I live in, the tipping point into recovery. Mm-hmm. I believe, I've moved past that into, not being afraid of the consequences. Well, if I go out and drink, this shitty stuff will happen and I'll end up in jail again or whatever. Now is, I don't want to drink because I want to have a good day tomorrow. Mm-hmm. And I want to do more good things that can, help somebody. I want to sit here on this radio, this podcast and admit that I've had a suicide attempt because it might help somebody.
Yeah. I mean, somebody actually just a little while ago said to me, who would listen to this stuff? And I said, you never know who's listening.
Right.
It's just like a meeting. You walk into a meeting and you never really know who's listening in that meeting and who you can affect. And it's the same thing with this. I mean, any of the listeners that decide to patch into this thing, they hear this stuff and they go, shit, I felt like that too in that moment. And even the things that we're feeling at the time. I mean, just because we feel a slip or a regression within a moment doesn't necessarily mean we're going to chuck the cookies out and throw the milk.
No, it used to. It used to. It was like, if I have any sort of failure, that's the bang, I'm gone. Yeah. I'm drinking.
Yeah.
Fuck this.
Looking for the excuse.
Well, yeah. Causing the excuse.
Yeah.
Going out looking for an argument to get in or something to screw up so I can go, done it, been there.
Yeah.
And today I don't want to do that anymore.
That's a shitty place to be in.
Sure is, yeah.
It's not fun because and that's not what recovery is about. Like, we didn't come into this thing. We didn't come into this thing to trudge. We came in this thing to trudge the road of happiness, mm-hmm. And it can be an amazing life. I've experienced more things in recovery and remembered them than I ever did in active addiction, right? Yeah. Like I said, I can't remember what happened in active addiction because, I don't really remember. I cannot trust my memory enough to know if it was a lie or if it actually happened,
right.
And even now, denial's a crazy thing. I've worked with guys today, 2-3 years in, and they'll call me up and be like, you know what, Justin, fucking denial really hit me yesterday. I didn't mean to say that to this guy, but you know what I did, and I know what you're gonna tell me. I got to go up to him and tell him that I fucking lied. Right? Who the hell wants to do that? But see, that's the exacting nature of an addict. Normal people can look at that and say, okay, I'm not going to do that again. Mm-hmm. We will let ourselves off the hook as much as we're hard on ourselves. We'll let ourselves off the hook of that emotional issue that we have to deal with, right? Because we abandon it. We just walk away from that, right? And that's really scary for us. It's almost detrimental to us, It's a real deficiency and it's a handicap, Mm-hmm. So being a sports guy, let me ask you how you feel about this gender issue that's coming out.
Oh boy.
with sports. I just witnessed a fight a little while ago, MMA fight, where a guy became a girl, mm-hmm. and he was beating the shit out of women. Like, there's no two ways about that. He has 3 kids, mm-hmm. And whooped them, and I thought to myself, that might be domestic assault, but apparently the Nevada State Fight Commission said that shit was above board. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh man, it just opens up so many different crazy freaking things that I don't even know what to say, Justin. It's no, I really don't.
I like to switch
really
up the
don't know
gears a
what to
little
say.
bit, you know?
I kind of came out of left field, but yeah, I mean, there was some high school kid, he's wrestling,
Yeah.
you know, and he's transgender and he's wrestling against girls, and same thing, whipping them. So I don't know. What do you do?
Yeah.
I think it's, would I say wrong? Yeah, I do. You know, personally, I think it's wrong, and it's unfair.
Yeah.
But it's the way the world's going, man. Everybody, you know.
We as males are not the same as females biochemically. You know what I mean? Genetically, we're just not the same. Our muscular predispositions are completely different from the opposite sex, and there's a reason for that. You know.
Yeah.
And I mean, from watching this stuff, I really wanted to know what your thoughts were on it, because I know you're a sports guy, and I really wanted to. And I think where we're going, in my opinion, is fucking oblivion. Like, it's crazy. Society is just crazy when it comes down to saying that, well, a woman can do exactly what a man can do. Well, I'd like to take a woman who's 6'2" and put you under a bench press and put her under a bench press and see if the weight can come anywhere near the same. It's just not going to be, you know, even with the steroids, you know. On her side, that is. It's just not going to be, you know. And I think in the context of a sober addict looking at that, at one time I think we would have picked up that mark and tried to change the world. And today I just focus on my own opinions, and from focusing on my own opinions, I don't have to change the world. Whereas before I would become this irate friggin' crazy nut that's trying to save the world about this. You know what I mean? And the social disposition that it was, I would like come unglued off of my chair and raise the bells and the alarms, you know? And I think one of the things that this podcast can do, because I've seen addicts get caught up in sobriety, like, so they're in sobriety looking at these world issues, and you hear this shit about Trump in a meeting. Who cares? Like, who cares?
Yeah.
And all I'm getting at is with this gender issue is these are our opinions, but they do not form that we're going to go out and try to change the world. You know, that's the point that I'm trying to make with this. You know, it's not the end all be all, die on every hill that we were ever on. You know
what you're saying, yeah.
Whereas before it was always dying on a hill. You know, so I think that in itself is the big mental change, right?
Yeah, I get what you're saying now. You know, like the way I approach that, I was actually just having this conversation, explaining my take on it the other day to somebody, because he asked me, he goes, what do you do if you think somebody doesn't respect you, but you still have to deal with them? And I was kind of like, well, I would say to myself, does this person's respect really affect whether they respect me or not? Does it affect my everyday life in any sort of way? And if the answer is no, I said, I really don't give a rat's ass if they respect me or not, because it doesn't have any effect on my life. You know, and I'll deal with them in whatever context I need to. And other than that, my life goes on. And whereas, like you just said before, you know, 6 months, a year ago, that would have drove me crazy for a month, and I would have been, oh my gosh, this guy doesn't like me. And today I'm okay with that, because before it was either everybody loved me or everybody hated me. You know, there's a big conspiracy against poor old Jeff, or Jeff was the best thing in the world, right? There was no middle ground. And today I realize that it's just not the way it works. And You know, I can die on every hill that I climb, and I'm okay today. It's just acceptance, right? It comes back to acceptance, and I'm more comfortable being me, you know, because I've kind of figured out a few things that I stand for, whereas before I didn't stand for anything because I would do anything, you know. Today I have, like to think I have a bit of a moral compass, and I have some principles due to the fact that I've done some work in the program, you know, the 12-step program that gives me a framework to rebuild my shattered character, right? Like it says in the book. And whereas before, you know, all of my ethics and morals were situational, you know, I really didn't, whatever I had to do or however I had to act or what I needed to project for the moment was what I did. And now, you know, I can stand there and say, whatever, you know.
It's funny how the outside used to dictate our personification.
Yes.
You know, and we finally come to a place where, and I say this to guys all the time, when they first come in, you have no idea who you are. And if you think what you had was good, you will never get something better later on. Because if you're chasing what you had is gone, and it's bullshit, and it will never be as good as what's coming up.
Right.
If you allow yourself to look at what's coming up to be better, you know? And it's cool to watch those scales of personification fall, because that personification was really only a tactic for us to get through life. And I kind of believe that with this gender dysphoria thing as well. Like when I look at it, I equate it to an addict. It's so friggin' extreme. Like it's so extreme that, like you were saying, there's no middle ground. And that's where we're at. Everything is so extreme. And yet here we are as addicts in recovery going, you look like a fucking nut. Like society itself looks like a fucking nut. And we're watching these so-called normies, normal people, lose their minds. They're outraged on everything that happens in the world, right? And it's funny to see how, like I said, those outside issues would dictate our personification. We would change on a dime. And what's really cool is that the anchor of your social moral compass is straight in its trajectory. It's not wavering because this is the status quo of society this week.
Right, yeah.
And I see that in addicts when they first come in. You know, when they first come in, they're this side or that side of the political spectrum or the social spectrum or whatever it may be. And I think that's an adherence when you get older in recovery. You recognize that this isn't going to work for me. I need to find out who I am, right? It's either that or they get a girlfriend and then they totally forget about what they're doing.
You're still looking for acceptance on some level because you're not comfortable, right? And a lot of times, just saw it 2 weeks ago. One of the guys I was living with went out and disappeared, you know, because he went and got himself a girlfriend because he could tell he just wasn't doing the work, you know, wouldn't go to meetings, never shared in meetings, didn't get into it, you know, was doing the things his way, and it didn't last. You could tell it wasn't gonna work, and it didn't. And yeah, it feels good to be able to just be.
So let's dive into that a little bit about. So I've seen a fair bit of death in recovery.
Yeah.
My sponsor first told me when I came in, he said to me, Justin, you better get a good suit. And I said, why? He goes, because you're actually going to show up to these funerals, you know? And damn it all, he was right. You know, I've seen a lot of death in recovery. I've seen more death in recovery than I have really in active addiction, you know? And it's crazy to think that every day that we wake up and we draw a sober breath, that's the price that's paid. You know, I call them martyrs because that's essentially what they are. We never picked to be addicts, you know. It wasn't a choice. I didn't wake up when I was 2 and 3 years old saying, I love to slam a needle in my arm when I'm 14 years old. You know, we didn't say that. And so it's crazy to watch us just drift like that, you know? And I know this also ties into the family, because the family sits there on the sidelines like they're just screaming that they want to save us. But truly the best thing they can do is stop picking up the phone at that time, right? Mm-hmm. And it's tough. It's tough going through that. And I've seen the fellowships really bunch together when we go through those times, right? Like, death is tough, and we see a hell of a lot of it. And every day that I draw a sober breath in the morning, I honor that. You know, I honor that I'm going to carry that. I'm going to carry my sobriety through another 24 hours, no matter what I got to do. And that's where my willingness starts from. Every point, like every morning, that's where it comes from. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you and I have seen a guy die. Wasn't really through recovery. He did die sober. I don't know if you knew that. Mm-hmm. And that was tragic. You know, he meant a hell of a lot to a hell of a lot of people.
Yeah.
And that was a real tough deal to go through, you know. What have your experiences been in that context, like the feelings that you've gone through with that?
Man. Well, just in the last, probably 6 months, there's multiple people. Like, we had a couple, when people die in the place, OD in the place where I'm at right now. I almost want to say you get to the point where it's just, you're kind of numb. It's just like, oh, another guy died. Like,
Yeah.
Got that notification 2 days ago. Another guy from the place where I'm at just passed away due to his addiction. His funeral's next Friday, and it's like, probably 5 people in the last 2 weeks, that I've known. And I don't know. It's just sort of, for me, the only thing I can do with it is use it as motivation, right? To keep myself going, and to still want to do the best that I can do, and try and find some sort of positive out of the passing of addicts. To be able to bring that message that it does actually happen, right? And that's the ultimate bottom, like,
yeah.
We can always justify another one until we're dead.
Yeah.
Man, I don't know how many bottoms I had, and it was, all of a sudden it's not a big deal that I've got a DUI and whatever, like everybody gets them. Mm-hmm. Before that I was like, that's never happened to me. I'm good.
That fucking line. There's
right?
that line.
Yeah.
Right?
And then, that happens, and then it's like the next thing, well, I've never been to jail. So then all of a sudden I've been to jail. Right. And that's okay. And so it's, you keep going until you're dead. Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. So I just use it to motivate myself.
Yeah.
To get another day, to stay humble and grateful.
You were talking about numbing, and I learned something, that numbing, if we still honor the death. So I would have never went to a funeral before in my past. Like, I wouldn't have did that unless it was somebody from my family, like my family. I say that in quotes.
Yeah.
But today I go, and the reason why I go is because I honor it in order to learn how to detach, mm-hmm. and detach in a healthy way. Because I never did that before. When I said goodbye to somebody, I always created a fight to say goodbye, or I created some sort of turmoil.
Make a big scene, yeah.
That's right.
Because it's about you. Yeah.
That's right. So now, and my sponsor taught me that too. Like, this is how we detach in a healthy way, because I've had enough sponsees to understand that when they decide to check out and leave, I need to learn that same kind of detachment. I need to be able to say, yep, that's it. That's it. He's gone. I'm not chasing him. Mm-hmm. And God willing, it comes back, and obviously death is the ultimate one. I'm always willing to answer my phone, even at 3-4 o'clock in the morning. That's why I make that commitment, but I mean, death is definitely a part of recovery, and those first couple are really tough. They're really, really hard. Those are the ones that I really remember. But to be honest with you, like you said, they're so common right now because of the fentanyl crisis.
Mm-hmm.
This fentanyl crisis I lived through the heroin epidemic and survived the heroin epidemic. This fentanyl epidemic, and being a guy who works in recovery, like with addicts, we have never seen the numbers that we're seeing right now. It's fucking crazy. Like, it's crazy. And we're finding fentanyl and methamphetamine. We're finding cocaine, everything, right? And it's crazy to believe that if the government would just decriminalize heroin, we would automatically stop the fentanyl epidemic in this moment. There's no reason to sell fentanyl if heroin is decriminalized or opium is decriminalized.
Mm-hmm.
It almost seems to me, and I have very privileged information, that the government themselves is pushing this as a genocide. And that's almost what it seems like on the side of people who are trying to create programs that would help, and programs that would actually save people from the gaps that our own system here in Canada we have, right? But the government is not interested. And you come to them and you literally point a finger at them saying, you are complicit in death.
Mm-hmm.
And their shoulders go up with their palms to their head. Yeah. And that's something, we're broke,
Wow.
And that's literally what it is. And here we are on the other side in recovery watching this. And it's fucking mind blowing. It's mind blowing. Here the parents are saying, my kid was a meth addict. How did they die of fentanyl?
Yeah.
It's just crazy, and it takes such a little amount that I mean, I've never seen an epidemic like this before, and I don't think we ever will again, and if you look at the way how drug charges are made, the drugs will become more minuscule in order to pass out, because that's less exposure for the drug dealers to get away with, right? I mean, that's just the name of the game. And like I said, I really believe that the government is complicit in killing all of these people. That's my personal opinion. But my personal opinion is formed from working with the government, trying to make new programs and new initiatives in order to help addicts. And when we bring them a proposal that's rock solid, they don't quite say no, but they definitely don't say a yes right away. Mm-hmm. They drag it on, right? And that dragging on, in my opinion, it's just bullshit. Watching these people die, it's fucking crazy. Like I said, it's just crazy. And
doesn't make a lot of sense when you look at it. Yeah, for sure.
I think a hospital bed costs us $1,200 a day for somebody dying. Mm-hmm. Okay, recovery costs $95 a day.
Mm-hmm. Well,
those are the per diem changes, right? And here we are sitting in this place. So now that we'll lighten the mood a little bit. So what are your goals for recovery? What are you looking at for the future?
What am I looking at for the future? I'm in a 60-person recovery house right now. Working, actually just waiting for the phone call to transfer out of that place to a place with 17 guys in it. Look at doing some schooling, going to work, all that. I'm not really sure which way I want to go with that yet, but probably school. I don't want to go back to welding. I don't want to go back to trades. I want to do something with my brain, and give back to the community, the recovery community. I want to, get into, when I was younger, I took social sciences in school because I wanted to get into that sort of stuff, and kind of lost my, I don't know, went sideways on that when, football came along and other things, endeavors. And through all of my, my personal experiences in the world of addiction and recovery, is, if I sit down and I look at my resume in the addiction and recovery world, is a hell of a lot bigger than, my, my professional resume. Don't get me wrong, I did some pretty cool stuff in the professional world, but it just makes sense. It's like, okay, well, what do I know a lot about, and what can I, sit and talk about for forever with just about anybody, is this, right? And I've been to a few treatment centers, and almost every counselor I've sat and talked to said, you'd be a great counselor. So, it's, somebody's knocking on my door.
It's definitely an avocation.
Yes.
It's, and I'll tell you, it's a 5-year lifespan, especially for men.
Yeah.
It's a tough job.
Oh, for sure. I could see that, man. Like, your success rate is minuscule. The stories and things that, we were just talking about death. I mean, I can imagine in those 5 years working in addiction recovery places, you're going to see a lot of those deaths, right? And it's going to be right there in front of you.
Yeah, I think so. I've been working in the addiction field for 4 years, three years now, and
so you're almost done.
Well, I'm an executive director. I'm an executive director. I don't have to do the hands-on anymore. And I honestly believe if I didn't take that step, I wouldn't have lasted. I saw guys coming into detox. So I was front line in addiction, and that was fucking nuts. That was nuts. Seeing, like I said, the value of a bottom doesn't matter. Where you've gone in a bottom doesn't matter. What really matters is the shape you're coming in physically, and detox was tough. I mean, we had a couple people die in detox.
Sure, yeah.
And that was tough. And I've also worked on the other side, like counseling guys one-on-one. And when that ends up happening, the crisis intervention that happens in those split seconds, because I take guys from detox who are going to treatment in that interim time, and that can be a crisis intervention for 6 to 7 hours. Sitting with a guy not stopping, they're schizophrenic, like clinically schizophrenic, and coming off of methamphetamine, and their meds aren't kicking in yet. Like that's a hell of a lot to deal with.
Sure,
right?
Yeah, it is.
So what was the biggest height in your professional career?
Sports or
all of
whatever?
It, out of all of it. What was the most favorite?
The most favorite? Man, in my professional career. I worked in the nutraceutical company industry for a long time, for 14 years. I was a sales rep and worked for a couple companies. But probably building the territory, because I took the territory of northern Alberta, northern Saskatchewan, and it was gross sales were maybe $5,000, and within a year and a half, I had it up 100,000, 120,000, and just that felt really cool. That I built that, right, and through diligent efforts and talent.
Yeah,
I just kind of have a knack for promotions and convincing people to do stuff. It sort of fit my lifestyle at the time, and I was, from the football, I went into professional wrestling and strongman and stuff like that. So kind of went right along with my whole lifestyle and my whole
I had
thing.
no idea that you were in professional wrestling.
For a while, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
How'd you like that?
Oh, it was a blast. You get to go out and act like a complete idiot for a little while, and it was awesome.
What
smashing
circuit?
Things and beating the hell out of people. And I got into it because I was doing strongman contests with, there was a fella named Grant, and he was personal trainer of a Canadian wrestling icon from down there, and he was his personal trainer, and he said, yeah, he's starting a development camp for WCW, and so he talked to Buddy and got me in there for free. Usually would have cost $10,000 or $20,000, but so I went down and I trained, and then I worked for a couple local ones here, and then a couple guys that I trained with, we started our own, and that was pretty cool. We started a training facility, teaching kids how to do it and running shows, and it was a blast.
Did you get any injuries from it?
Oh man, I busted my head open. Like on the ring post, I got about a 2.5-inch gash on my head here from the ring post, and that was interesting. You know, the blood was squirting out of my head clear across the room into the front row, and it was funny because I was like, of course, I was almost got knocked unconscious, but we kept on with the match, and Buddy's sitting there stomping on my head and taking advantage of the fact that blood's squirting out of it. And I remember, kind of laying on the ropes and blood squirting all over the front row of the people there. And I remember hearing this guy go, "How's he getting that blood to squirt out of his head like that?" Like it was, it was a work, but it was pretty funny. I probably cracked up, but yeah, it was a good time. But I probably had more injuries in learning how to wrestle than I did in the whole time playing football, because you have to unlearn everything that you learn as an athlete. When as an athlete, you learn how to get into the power position, and you fight force with force and blah, 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 and all that kind of stuff. Wrestling, you have to learn how to fall, and you have to, all of the things that are completely opposite to what you learned as an athlete. And it was tough, You can't fake gravity. You can't fake a chair to the head. You can't fake, I was 320 pounds and I'm doing flips off the top rope onto people. Jeez, and that's, Christ. You can't fake that. You can't make it any lighter.
Oh, God. Oh, my God.
And, power bombs through tables, they hurt.
How long did training take? How long were you in the camp for?
About 10 months. 10 months of, Monday to Friday sort of thing. Weekends I would come home and hang out with the family and the kids and stuff. But
it's crazy how extreme we are. And everything that we do, how we just go over that line,
Well, that's exactly why I was doing it. Like, that's when my addiction got really bad with the dope. The whole wrestling lifestyle of partying and pills and, because professional wrestling, they're going, 365 days in a year. They're probably wrestling 330, 350 of them every night, beating the crap out of yourself. So there's a lot of, there's a lot of pills, there's a lot of pain. There's a lot of injuries that they got to keep going with. And I kind of got caught up in all that, and with the wrestling and the strongman, I was still trying to fill that thing that I had as a kid, right? Because the football was over, and then it was like, okay, well, what am I now, right?
How did the football end?
Oh, man. The football ended. I went to training camp and injured myself on the first day. It wasn't a terrible injury. I pulled my hamstring, my left hamstring, and I didn't tell anybody, right? I'd injured myself because I didn't want to get cut. I didn't want to, and sure enough, I went to practice the next morning and blew my right hamstring because my left one wasn't working. So I took all, and in training camp, you can't run, so it just becomes a numbers game,
So was this for pro ball or was this college ball?
It was professional, CFL.
Wow. Yeah. That's That would be a tough bullet to bite.
It was a bit of a bitter pill, yeah, because I had worked it out differently in my head.
Yeah. You know what though? That being said, like even as a fighter, you work out the fight in your head differently than when you get knocked out, right?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be walking in the fucking ring if I thought I was going to get knocked out, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I can empathize with that. You know, that's a tough pill to swallow. But it led you into the wrestling world, and it sounds like you had an excellent time doing that.
Oh, it was fun. It was fun. But then the risk to reward kind of came along. You know, like had a couple more kids, and it was kind of like, okay, do I really want to be doing this and breaking my neck, and where's the family going to be, right? So
those are catastrophes if they were to happen, right?
Yeah.
But again, our thinking mentality and that extremeness, we don't think about that shit at all. Like, well,
I didn't. My wife did. I was good with it. I was good to keep going, and she's like, well, I was like, shut up. But that did end up leading me into recovery because I had a meltdown, right? I just was using all the time, and it led into sort of the deconstruction of what I call Big Jeff, right? Because I had this image that I was portraying and trying to fulfill still, this emptiness, this having to portray this image that I'd built, this thing, right? And man, after going to treatment, I kind of took a look and I said, wow, I am doing that. I'm not living as me. I'm living as this thing that I've created and I'm trying to sustain. And, so, I mean, I lifted weights my whole life and so I just quit, right? I said, screw it. I'm not going to go to the gym anymore. I shaved all my hair off. I got skinny and fat. And you know what? People still liked me. My kids still loved me. Mm. And I said to myself, you know what? That whole fucking thing was bullshit because nobody really gave a rat's ass except me, except my insecurities, right? And, that was kind of the turning point. It's like, you know what? I don't have to do that anymore because I was doing it out of the need to please everybody, but nobody cared. I'm as big as I used to be, but I'm doing it now because I enjoy it.
Yeah.
Not because I have to, not because I'm trying to impress anybody. I enjoy going to the gym and lifting weights, whereas before I didn't. It was something that I had to do, and now it's something I like to do, right? Yeah,
that's kind of like I've adopted that philosophy in life. Like, I mean, I used to be a land surveyor at one time. I love the profession. Still to this day, I love it. But it's what I did in order to survive. Mm-hmm. I love selling drugs. I mean, that was the hardest job I've ever had in my life. Truly.
The hours are shitty.
The hours are shitty. And I was also a pimp. Being a pimp, that was a really good job. But the problem with that was the hours were even shittier than being a drug dealer, And extortion was great. I mean, that was real fucking easy, Mm-hmm. But those were all the means to survive.
Yeah.
Today, I don't make a hell of a lot of money, and I thrive. It's not surviving every day. I would say 99 days out of 100, I'm waking up loving what I do, and my life is really simple today. And it's funny, like you're talking about the wrestling, so on and so forth, living in an extremism. And now when we're looking at your future potential goals, it's like we want that mediocre life. We want that life where it's I've got a Toyota Prius, and I don't think you could fit in a Toyota Prius. But
it'd be a struggle,
we look for the Toyota Prius, and We want the 1,200 square foot house and the white picket fence, but it's achievable, you know?
Yeah.
And it's not that it's so much the ideology of it. It's that we don't give a shit about the mini mansion and the BMWs and the Bentleys or any of that. That doesn't matter anymore. What matters is that I feel good in what I'm doing day to day, you know? And that's really, in my opinion, that is the pinnacle of success and happiness right there. You know, success is not achieved by the mini mansion and all that bullshit. You know, that doesn't equate in my opinion. So we've got an hour in. I think we're gonna wrap it up now. And I thank you very much for coming in, Jeff. I'd love to definitely follow up with you again if you're open to that in maybe 4 or 5 months or so.
Yeah, sure.
I'm sure my listeners are gonna have a bunch of questions.
Ooh, I hope so.
and so we'll go from there. So I thank you again for listening. And,
my pleasure. Thank you.
We'll talk to you again, listeners. Bye for now.